This is the tutorial for Contingency Management, Strategies for Decreasing Behavior. We are going to go through a variety of strategies for decreasing challenging behavior, but before we do, I want to draw your attention to the considerations that are on pages 185 through 187 of your purple textbook. So please make sure that you take a look at those. The first level of strategies that we're going to talk about are reinforcement-based strategies. These are the DR family of strategies. The first one we're going to look at is differential reinforcement of lower rates of behavior, or DRL. In this strategy, you're going to reinforce or give reinforcements when the number of responses in a specified period of time is less than or equal to a prescribed limit. What does that mean in English? Look at the example below. We have Susie Bigmouth, and she talks out an average of 10 times per 30-minute period. So we know that 10 times per 30-minute period is kind of her baseline. She's told that she will receive 1 minute of free time at the end of the day for each 30-minute period that she talks out 5 or less times. So we've taken the 10 times per 30-minute period baseline, and we've reduced it. She doesn't have to go to 0 yet, but we've reduced the level. So now she has to talk out 5 or less times. Once she has been hitting that and getting her reinforcement fairly consistently, then you can actually reduce the level some more if you want. So then to get free time, she needs to talk out 2 perhaps or less times per 30-minute period. So you can systematically reduce the level as the student progresses. So that is DRL. The next one is differential reinforcement of other behaviors, or DRO. Sometimes it's called differential reinforcement of zero rates of behavior, or differential reinforcement of the omission of behavior. But it's pretty much you give reinforcement if the behavior does not occur throughout a specific time period. So you're giving reinforcement for the behavior not happening. So think about how this could be applied to Susie Bigmouth. In the previous example, she was talking out 10 times per 30-minute period, and we were reducing the level that she had to hit to be reinforced. In DRO, this would look very different. In fact, we would be reinforcing her if we were to stay with a 30-minute time period. We would be reinforcing her when she showed no talk-out behavior during that 30-minute period. That might be a little bit robust and much to ask of Susie Bigmouth. So one thing we might consider if we wanted to use DRO with her is that we would reduce the time period. So perhaps she would be reinforced if she did not talk out at all for a 5-minute period or a 2-minute period or whatever you thought was reasonable. The next strategy is differential reinforcement of alternative behavior, or DRA. Technically, this is a reinforcement strategy for increasing appropriate behavior, but I put it here just as review. We will have talked about it. We're going to talk about it in class. I put it here because the DR strategies tend to hang together as a group, but this is for the student being reinforced for exhibiting a more appropriate alternative replacement behavior. So you remember the goal that you're writing for your behavior plans. That goal is really housed in terms of what we want the student to do. This would become the stuff of reinforcement if you were using DRA. So I'm not going to reinforce any challenging behavior that's occurring, but I am going to systematically reinforce when that appropriate replacement behavior is being exhibited. So if we were thinking about Susie Bigmouth, let's pretend like instead of talking out, we wanted her to raise her hand. So if she raises her hand, if we were using DRA, we would be giving her reinforcement every time she was raising her hand. The next one and the last DR strategy that we're going to talk about is differential reinforcement of incompatible behavior. This is one of my favorites. It's very sneaky. This is DRI. So what you need to do is to determine a behavior that's topographically incompatible with a behavior targeted for reduction and actually reinforce that behavior. So for example, one of my dear colleagues has a son who, when he went to high school, he would scream during passing periods in the hall, not because he was, actually it was the function of the behavior was play. He liked the echo, and that was all. So they employed a DRI strategy, and they gave him gum. You can't scream and chew gum at the same time. So he was given gum during passing time and reinforced for chewing gum. If you have a student who is hitting, then perhaps you might give the student heavy books to carry during those times. Let's say the child is hitting during passing periods or whatnot. Then you would reinforce carrying those books. Or sometimes, I know with hitting, we have kids put their hands in their pockets during those times that are tempting. You would reinforce putting your hands in your pockets because that's incompatible. You can't put your hands in your pockets and hit people at the same time. So we've gone through the DR strategies. The next group of strategies would belong under the level 2 strategy. So we're getting a little bit more robust in sort of our intervention here. So the first level 2 strategy is extinction. That's a fancy term for ignoring. It means you withhold the positive reinforcer that maintains the inappropriate target behavior, namely you withhold attention. It's best used in tandem with reinforcement of appropriate behaviors. So you're going to ignore any negative or inappropriate behaviors that occur, and then you're going to reinforce those appropriate behaviors that you've determined that you want to see. You have to be really careful when you use extinction. Sometimes there's a delayed reaction, so it takes some time for extinction to take hold. There is oftentimes, 99.9% of the times, there's an increased rate of challenging behavior that occurs before it starts to go down. The technical term for this is an extinction burst. And so behavior tends to get worse before it gets better when you are putting it on extinction. You have to be really, really prepared to control your attention to make sure that you're directing your attention to appropriate behaviors and ignoring those inappropriate behaviors. This can be really challenging if the inappropriate behavior is dangerous to other people, to oneself, or could involve destruction of property or whatnot. Sometimes one has to intervene. And so in those situations, what I've done in the past is I might need to physically intervene with a student, but I might not provide any eye contact or any talking to the student, but I may still physically intervene. But that can be really challenging to do. You might encounter extinction-induced aggression. This can be seen as part of an extinction burst. So you might have a student who's used to behaving in a certain way and getting a certain response. When that's not working, then you will see this increase in the challenging behavior, and then also an increase in the intensity of the challenging behavior, which is oftentimes aggressive because the child is trying to get what he or she is used to getting. Many times there's a spontaneous recovery. That means that extinction, so you might put a behavior on extinction, the behavior spikes, there's an extinction burst, then it starts to go down, it might even go away altogether, but then all of a sudden it will come back. So one needs to be prepared for that. And also, this is a drawback of using extinction to begin with. There might still, while you might be able to control your attention, you can't control everybody's attention. So there might still be imitation or reinforcement of that challenging behavior by others, particularly other students in the class. And extinction can also have limited generalizability to other settings or to other people especially. So just because you put something on extinction and the behavior goes away, it doesn't mean that teacher X down the hall that things are going to be smooth sailing for her because your extinction protocol worked. Lots of times when extinction's being done, it has to be done by everybody across the board for it to really take hold. So now we're looking at levels 3 and 4 of decreasing inappropriate behaviors. These involve punishment. So let's define our terms a little bit. Something that is a punisher, remember, decreases the future rate or probability of occurrence of behavior. It's something that's delivered to a student with the idea that it's going to decrease the possibility that the behavior is going to occur in the future. It's administered contingently on the production of the undesired or inappropriate behavior. We don't just apply a punisher for something random. It has to be, just like reinforcement is contingent on good behavior, punishment is contingent on inappropriate behavior. And it's administered immediately. These are just like, again, the golden rules of reinforcement. The flip side is the golden rules of punishment. If you apply punishment later, it oftentimes does not have the meaning to the student. I remember I was working with a child with autism when I was teaching, and he had autism, and he was limited verbally. When he got frustrated, he would pinch, and before we had a good paraprofessional in, and before I actually was this child's case manager, this child pinched his paraprofessional, who then complained to the special ed teacher who was the case manager at the time, and somehow this got to the principal, and so the principal decided to call this kindergartner with autism in her office the next day and tell him that he had lost his recess because the day before he had pinched his paraprofessional. Well, that had about as much meaning for him as if she were speaking an African clicking language, because there had been so much time that had the latency between when he had actually exhibited the behavior and when the punishment was being administered was so big, it had no meaning anymore. So I'm going to continue in the following slides to discuss some different punishment procedures, and I want you to listen to them and then discuss with yourself, and actually we're going to discuss this in class, these two questions. So under what conditions should punishment be used, and what safeguards should be put in place if an intervention involving punishment is to be used? So keep those in mind as we go through these slides, and certainly we'll be talking about these in class on Thursday. So, level 3. A level 3 strategy for reducing inappropriate behavior is timeout. We've heard about that. There are actually different types of timeout. So the first one is non-seclusionary timeout. This means that the student is not removed from the instructional setting, but is denied access to reinforcers through a temporary manipulation of the environment. So you can see the example down below. You might have a student put his head down on his desk. You might move the student away from the group. You might give a card to a student that prevents the student from accessing the ability to earn tokens for a specific amount of time. So the student's given a card, and maybe for the next hour, if you are using some kind of token economy, that student is sort of timed out from being able to earn those tokens for that next hour. So that's non-seclusionary timeout. There is exclusionary timeout. This means the student's removed from the area, removed from the activity to a separate area. So the student could be told to stand in the corner. I hope we don't do that anymore. Sit on a bench, have the chair turn away from the group. Okay, but there's some removal of the student from the activity. And then the last one is seclusionary timeout. This is when the student is removed from the classroom or area altogether to a room used for total social isolation. Sometimes these are called timeout rooms. Sometimes they have the innocuous title of sensory room. This is usually reserved for really severe behaviors, and these behaviors are these procedures for using seclusionary timeout are guided by school, district, or state policies. It's really important, if you're going to use seclusionary timeout for whatever reason, that you are familiar and trained in these policies. Reason being, students have died in seclusionary timeout. It is not something that you take lightly. It's not something that we do without thinking about it very thoroughly to make sure that we're doing exactly what we need to do. Okay, another level 3 technique is called response cost. This means withdrawing of specific amounts of reinforcer contingent on inappropriate behavior. So if you do something bad, I'm going to take something good away from you. So you do something bad, I take away recess minutes, I take away tokens, I take away privileges, whatnot. If you're using response costs, students need to be made aware of the rules of behavior and the penalties. Just like we're very clear in a reinforcement system about what you have to do to earn reinforcers, tokens of whatever kind, you also need to be very clear if you're going to use a response cost system that you're clear about what exactly is going to get things taken away from you. Because if you're inconsistent, this can lead to lots of power struggles and just very ineffective results. All right. The final level are level 4 techniques, and these involve a presentation of an aversive stimuli. These are like physical restraint, presentation of substances that are irritating or uncomfortable, yelling, those kinds of things. Substances that are irritating or uncomfortable, again, I hope we don't ever do this anymore, but in the past we have sprayed kids with lemon juice. We have given them bitter apple on their tongues. The whole wash your mouth out with soap thing, that is a level 4 kind of technique. There are some different kinds of techniques that are under the umbrella of overcorrection that are contained within this level 4 area. And there are 3 kinds of overcorrection that we're going to talk about. So there's restitutional overcorrection, positive practice overcorrection, and negative overcorrection. And I'm done with my slides. So let me talk about overcorrection. So restitutional overcorrection involves if something bad happens, you are responsible for not only making that situation right, but making it even better than it was before you did the thing that was bad. So a simple example is like, say like you're throwing trash on the ground. So in restitutional overcorrection, not only are you made to pick up your own trash, but then you get to pick up other trash that was on the floor and make everything even better than it was before you started. Positive practice overcorrection means that if you engage in a negative behavior, then what you need to do is engage in multiple trials of practicing the right response. So this is used in toilet training a lot. So if a child has an accident, then if you were using positive practice overcorrection, the child would be made to sort of go through the routine of telling the caregiver that he or she needed to go to the bathroom, and then going through that routine of going to the bathroom, pull down your pants, sit on the toilet, get up from the toilet, wipe yourself, pull your pants up, wash your hands, do it again, do it again, do it again, for however many times it was determined. Positive practice sounds really, really super nice, but if you were made to go to the bathroom and go through your paces like that over and over, that's not so fun. So that is positive practice. Negative practice involves doing the negative behavior over and over again. The classic example of this is people who want to quit smoking. So we're going to, lock them in a room and give them as many cigarettes as they want and let them just smoke themselves until they're sick. And that's going to just create such an impression that they're not going to smoke ever again. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. I had an experience, I tried this, and I didn't know what I was doing. Don't do this at home, people. When I was in the Peace Corps, I had a child who threw chairs. Now, I will say that I was very early in my teaching practice. I decided that I was just going to get this kid, and I was going to make him just throw chairs all day long. Throw chairs, throw chairs, throw chairs, throw chairs, because that would just produce, he would be so satiated with throwing chairs that it would be over. So I made him do that. And 3 hours later, he was still throwing chairs. And 4 hours later, he was still throwing chairs. What I neglected to do, which is rule number 1 we all know, of determining the appropriate responses to challenging behavior, is that I never thought about the function of the behavior. And guess what? The function of the behavior was to get my attention. So how did I respond? Well, like a nimwit, I responded by having him throw chairs. And what did he have for hours and hours and hours? He had my undivided attention. So he was in hog heaven throwing chairs because I was standing there telling him to throw chairs. So negative practice, not recommended at home. Definitely have to know the function, but you can see by my terrible example of how it backfires, that's what it is. You make the student practice the negative behavior over and over again. So this ends our tutorial for this evening or today, and we will be talking about and playing with these different strategies and talking about how we feel about them in class on Thursday.